Let's get to our top story this morning.
This
morning, we have new information on last month's operation in Iran targeting the country's nuclear facilities. Citing a senior Israeli government official, NBC's Andrea Mitchell reports Israel believes at least some of Iran's highly enriched uranium at one of its sites was not destroyed in the U.S. airstrikes targeting the base. However, that official tells NBC News that uranium is buried deep beneath the facility and is effectively unreachable. The official says Israel is monitoring activity closely, and if Iran is seen trying to recover the material, Israel will not hesitate to carry out new strikes.
Let's bring it around. The President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass. He's the author of the weekly newsletter Home and Away on Substack, also Morning Joe's official golf analyst. Maybe we'll see if he wants to talk about tennis. Also, managing editor at The Bulwark, Sam Stein, who's going to be stepping in, talking about all things Red Sox in the middle of a 7-game winning streak.
Amazing.
It is amazing. Richard, it's very interesting details coming out of this Israeli intelligence. That is that not all the uranium was destroyed, but it is rendered ineffective right now because it's buried. And if the Iranians go after it, well, it may be the last thing they do. Tell us what you know.
Yeah, I think there's two takeaways from this. One is the strikes were pretty effective in terms of knocking out thousands of centrifuges and in probably making it difficult, if not impossible, to reach all this enriched uranium. That's the good news. Obliteration is the president's favorite word, is probably a step too far, in part because some things may have survived. And more important, there's parts of the program that were never there to begin with. And I think what we're looking at is a future, Joe, and I think this is the bottom line, where this is a problem that's been diminished. The program was set back, but not eliminated. And one has to assume that the big takeaway in Iran will be, hey, we need nuclear weapons in order to deter the Americans and the Israelis from ever doing anything like this again. So my guess is we're looking at a future where the Iranians slowly, in all sorts of decentralized ways, try to rebuild a program. Easier said than done. It will take more time. But my guess is this is not the last time we will have used military force, either we or the Israelis will have used military force against Iran's nuclear program. I can imagine 6 months from now, 6 years from now, there'll be new intelligence about some equipment or material in some location. And if it can't be resolved diplomatically, I think once again you'll see military action called in against Iran.
So, Richard, let's talk about that potential diplomacy here. That we're talking about the specifics of how effective that attack was, but let's talk geopolitically about the aims of that attack to try to bring Iran to the negotiating table, to bring Iran to heel in some ways. How effective was it there? What do you expect to see now?
Well, it's tough because Iran has stopped cooperation with the international weapons inspectors, so that obviously works against diplomacy. We'd have to be willing to relieve sanctions. I think that's probably the big Iranian ask at this point because their economy is in rough shape and the regime is focused right now. Priority number one for this regime is shoring itself up. Among other things, getting economic sanctions relief would help there. So I think there's a possibility for some diplomacy. I think you'd call it a long shot, either to reach an agreement and then also to implement an agreement and stay true to it over time rather than have, say, the Iranians trying to work around it. So I think it's fine to pursue the diplomatic approach, and we will. But I just think it's unrealistic to think that it's going to solve the problem for all time going forward.
So the Wall Street Journal editorial board is writing about this with a new piece entitled "What's Trump's Next Move on Iran?" It reads in part, quote, "The aftermath of the 12-day war with Iran looks mixed. More than 2 weeks later, Iran's nuclear program was badly damaged and likely set back for years. But the Ayatollah's government isn't admitting defeat and shows no signs of dropping its revolutionary or nuclear designs. There's no sign Iran will surrender the remains of its enrichment program. Iran has driven out United Nations weapons inspectors who left the country last week. It may drop out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. That will make it impossible for inspectors to make a ground-level estimate of the damage done and track or collect any nuclear material that remains. Iran isn't hankering for normal relations with the West either. The successful U.S. military operation has the regime more vulnerable than at any time since the Islamic Revolution. Now is the moment to capitalize for a safer Middle East. The question is how, when?
Well, the question also is Sam? What's the political possibility of doing this and having, the majority of people in Congress or in America supporting you? And I will just say, I think the Iranian sites should have been struck. I actually. I agree with the president and with those that he succeeded over the past 25 years. Iran can't have a nuclear program. That said, I may be in the minority when it comes to American voters on what they're willing to have the United States do to stop that from happening. I mean, and part of that is, it used to be Democrats would be against, most Democrats would be against a military operation. Most Republicans would support that military operation. I guess this is the old Republican in me coming out. But it is so mixed, isn't it, Sam? It is really, it's hard to follow exactly the ebb and the flow of the MAGA base, people on the left who support Israel, some of those who support. It's really hard to tell how much support there'd be for the president going back and striking Iran again.
Yeah, I actually don't think you'd be in the minority. I think people view this through a nuanced lens, but I do think, if I'm understanding it correctly, that there's a lot of hesitation for overengagement in the country. And look, I at the Bulwark, we wrote about this with a varying degree of opinions, but I think generally we were supportive of the strikes for the purposes of getting rid of, or at least setting back, the nuclear program. But the question, I suppose, now is at what cost, right? Did we set back diplomatic efforts with Iran as well? And then I think Richard really hit on the more important question is, did we lose visibility into what Iranian nuclear program objectives were and what's happening on the ground going forward? Because frankly, Iran's going to try to reconstitute their program. Obviously, we know that they've said so. If they do it in secret, and if they pop up in 3 or 4 months and say, hey, we've actually accelerated, did we actually accomplish what we set out to do with these strikes? This is all by way of saying this is an incredibly nuanced, difficult geopolitical question to tackle. My sense is that the Trump administration actually does, at this point, want to find some sort of diplomatic path forward. Trump has hinted at it. They've had negotiations. They want to get them back. They've actually dangled the idea of sanction relief on Iranian oil. It hasn't come to fruition yet. But I wouldn't be totally surprised if the Trump administration starts pursuing more aggressively a diplomatic resolution to maybe like stabilize the region a little bit. And I do agree with you, Joe. I think there's a lot of hesitation in the MAGA base out there about more and more military engagement. And so it might have worked this time in terms of politically striking Iran. I'm not totally sure how much more he can go back to that well.
Yeah, Richard, it's very interesting. We were talking yesterday about interpreting what the president said when he seems to say things that are either conflicting or ambiguous regarding his Secretary of Defense. If you sort through it, it's actually not too ambiguous at all what he was saying. Here, the same thing with Iran, where he said several things. But I'm wondering if your read on President Trump on this issue is the same as mine. He said 2 weeks and then he attacked. And that was clearly a head fake. Afterwards, he said, I'm not going to even think about this after this week, something along those lines. Didn't really mean that, though. He's had some statements afterwards basically pushing the Iranians, saying, you need to play this smart. You need to deal with this. I'm curious what you think the president's current, and by the way, that's the take of most Arab leaders right now is, the president is not going to let Iran off the hook, at least the Arab leaders I talk to. I'm curious, though, where you believe the president is right now on deterring this nuclear risk moving forward, one, and two, what you would advise this president or any other president in this position to do.
I would probably do a two-pronged policy, Joe. I would explore it diplomatically, and I think that will be the president's inclination. He's attracted to the big diplomatic deal. So I would put on the table a grand bargain, if you will, with Iran and lay it out in terms of support for proxies, put the priority on not reconstituting their nuclear program. It would require getting international weapons inspectors back in, offer them sanctions relief. And I think there's a chance. I don't think that's far-fetched because, again, the Iranian regime is something on the ropes. Think about it. They've had a terrible year and a half, 2 years since October 7th. It has been economically and strategically a fiasco for the Iranian regime. A lot of their senior people have been assassinated. So I don't think it's out of the question that they would accept a deal. And then on the back burner, you have the military option, and it's not going to war with Iran. Again, it would be discrete strikes, kind of like Israel and the United States did. So I think if the president combines the two, a good faith diplomatic approach that's demanding but not inconceivable, puts aside regime change, and has in his back pocket the possibility of renewed military force, I think that's worth pursuing, and I hope he goes for it.